a few years back, I wasn't like this. I was like a lazy guy that was like, oh shit, I don't want to do this. This is
Yeah.
another problem. But now I've met such crazy people and they've inspired me somehow that if I see a problem, no, I'll rack my brain on this for a week rather than
Mhm.
just letting it go. Somehow happens naturally.
Madison, we're back today on the Indie Magazine podcast talking to a generative AI musician, Satyam. He's based in New York City, and we got connected just talking about AI, music, where it's going, and it's an interesting podcast for those wondering about how can you perform, how do you make music that way. It's definitely a fun one.
When right now is a good time to talk about AI, so I'm excited to listen.
Stick around after, and we'll talk about some of the shows and movies we watched recently, and enjoy the pod. Satyam, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Happy to have you on. And for everyone listening, tell us a little about yourself, where you grew up, where you live now, and then what you do in the creative space.
So I'm from India and I grew up in an eastern industrial town called Tata. So the place isn't really famous, but a company that grew out of it, that's everybody knows this name is Tata. It owns like Jaguar and stuff at this point. Pretty big. That's my identifier. But growing up, I was into physics. I don't know why, but I did that for a while. I still do that, to be honest. Like I'm doing my PhD here in New York. How I ended up here, that might not be pretty interesting because I just applied to a college and I got it. Not much of a story here, but since I've been here, it has been a weird but fun journey, I would say. I met a lot of like crazy people, and there have been some tough times, but when people say, why do you stay here? I have my two mentors. One of my mentor teaches me sketching, so I sketch people, like live models. That's He's one of the reasons I still choose to stay here. And another mentor that teaches me new media art. So that's something that I do. I don't think there's a very concrete definition of what new media art is, but it's something that involves some kind of scientific methodology and intersections of art, obviously, and tech. Tech is pretty much what they're trying to innovate. But yeah, more about that later. But this is the weird intersection that I'm at, that I do physics professionally. I'm a PhD student here. Yeah, I would love to bore you about the details of my physics later on. But yeah, for now, I would just say that I use my physics things to make music and a lot of visuals. Yeah, maybe that's a summarized version of me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And honestly, I think maybe the ideas are changing where I think people used to think you were either math, science, brain, or arts. That was
Hmm.
it, right? But
Yep.
especially like you're saying with the intersection of technology, I feel like more people are realizing you can be both. It's just a different
True.
approach to it, right?
Hmm.
Maybe you think of some of the bigger artists from the 60s, 70s, who everyone just thought of as creative. And now that we're hearing their stories coming out, it's more, oh, they were mathematical and everything had a time
True.
signature. And it's like a very, I think of looking at sheet music from Beethoven or others and just being like, that is very definite. And to your
Yeah.
point, it's physics in a way, or there's the idea of sound and that creation that is not
Hmm.
so much just doodling and drifting off. It is
Yeah.
something a little more concrete, which is cool.
Yeah. I
Now,
think there's a sorry,
no,
sorry,
you're
go on.
going. No, you're good.
So I think there's a sense of pattern in whatever we do. I don't know, whichever field you want to talk about, biology or music or physics, there is a sense of patterns and a methodology of how we approach problems. I think that philosophical, pedagogical idea is the same, but how we articulate our thoughts, that's different. Maybe Beethoven was good in articulating his thoughts through music and not through maths. Somebody else is good in articulating her thoughts in maths and not music. I think it's just chasing patterns, and once you're there, you just use them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And finding the right medium that it feels comfortable to speak out of and feels like you're really getting your point
Yeah,
across. Do you feel like growing up you had an opportunity to try out more creative mediums, or did you stick to the sciences early on?
that's maybe a cultural thing that just to bring in context, India is not very good. In fact, it's bad
Yeah.
when we talk about creative spaces. There are a few scientific avenues of career that you can take, but if you're not into that, art is something that you might not want to pursue. And not because like how they portray in movies, like your parents are dissing you if you do that or something.
Yeah.
I've just realized that it's India is not the place. You could be a crazy good writer and artist, but probably you'll be unemployed for a long time.
That's
So
interesting, especially knowing that Bollywood is so huge. I forget what the other center of movies there. It's not Tamil. Anyways, but yeah, with Bollywood and then the Indian music scene seems to be pretty big,
yeah,
right?
getting the hip hop
And
scene, yeah.
the hip hop scene, I was gonna say, so there is so much going on with art, but like you're saying, countrywide or culturally,
Hmm,
still not very well respected, maybe,
true,
or
true.
easy to get those jobs.
Yeah. So in general, whoever in TV or whoever's making music, at least the good ones,
Hmm.
they're probably like side hustling.
Uh,
Like they have a day job and they're doing, and this is like most of it. I don't think even like 10% of people might want to like officially study a course in music or whatever artistic field they want to pursue. They pursue the scientific field so that they have a backup option and they side hustle into other things. And if things work out well enough, but mostly it doesn't.
yeah. Can you maybe speak to, with your own experience, how you felt about it? Was it just a feeling of security, maybe with another way, or was it just what everyone else was doing so you wouldn't question it?
You mean me approaching art as a career?
Yeah, approaching
Okay.
art and music and that and exploring that earlier.
So for me, it was an avenue to maybe meet people.
Hmm.
I guess that's one of my main motives if you talk about art, or it's not making money. And I've realized people don't make money even if they get successful.
Yeah.
So that's out of the window. But for me, I feel like I've met so much. I don't want to say that tech or science people are boring. I don't want to make such assumptions, but there is some correlation with artistic people being freaky and just being interesting. I don't know, to me at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I chase. But when you talk about pursuing it professionally, I think for me, it was not something that I was going to do or ever, maybe. But as I was mentioning, my mentors, coincidentally, I don't know, that seems like a miracle now that I think about it, that I've got such good mentors, like artistically speaking, or just emotionally attached to them both aspects that they make me want to do this. I've learned so much maybe in just a year that I couldn't have learned in like a decade maybe. I feel like if I pursue this as a career, it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to have
Yeah.
so much fun. That much I know.
That's a weighty trade-off, but that is a good point.
Yeah.
So talk a little about, maybe before we get back to your mentors and what you're doing currently. When you grew up, what did you listen to? What did you like? What did you discover for yourself?
Oh, so there are two pathways that I see with this. One of them I've approached and I've been thinking. The other is still too alien. There are two things that relate to the artistic thing. First of all, my first ever artistic endeavor would have been cooking, actually. That is not related to any of this.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I remember like like maybe a decade or even more than like 15 years back, there's this show called Eat Street on a channel called TLC. I don't know if you guys have it in US.
Yeah, we have TLC. Yeah.
You have? Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. There was a show called Eat Street, okay? And it was about food carts in New York mostly, but a lot of other places like LA, Chicago.
Yeah.
And that was my first ever exposure to the food scene, I would say. And that made me wanna curious. Like I wanna taste this stuff, but I can't. I mean, India is not very multi cuisine kind of
Hmm.
place. That was one like burning desire. I haven't tackled it. I'll get to the food scenes someday. I don't know, a few years
Yeah.
later. But that was one thing that was knocking me out. Apart from that, I've been into hip hop a lot, and what I liked about hip hop that I could do hip hop like just as a bathroom singer would, you know.
Hmm.
I can't do like proper classical pieces. I would have to be trained, but to do hip hop, you could be a person that doesn't know anything about music theory or about writing or whatever. You could just be doing stuff and being in the flow.
Yeah.
So I was a lot into hip hop. And as a kid, I guess it just seemed cool the way they dressed, the way they talk.
Yeah.
Like
The whole
that was
culture and the vibe. Yeah.
yeah. And I still love that, to be honest. But that was something that I wanted to be able, but I want to be able to rap. That's a kiddish dream now that I think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to do that, and somehow I was like, okay, before I start doing that, I gotta have a beat. I got to know something about music, like very basic stuff. Then, and weird enough, my scientist brain is something that I cannot go with understanding, with not understanding this thing and just accepting it as it.
Yeah.
So I started understanding each and everything through how the sound is created from the very basics and making my own drums and keys and
Yeah.
everything from scratch. That's how I got interested. And there was a day I remember, like very transformative day in my memory, that I was making just a very simple synth that you just press a key and sound happens. And I did all the math and physics stuff to make it. But what happens is you have to test the stuff, right? So
Hmm.
I started making it and testing throughout the frequencies, like the highs and the lows. And I was doing it for, I don't know, like 5 6 hours continuously and just pressing it like a button and doing stuff with it. And I was like, and after those few hours, I was like, I can tell how much high or low that frequency is just by listening at it. And I realized this is what people talk about when they talk about having a sense of music,
Mm.
when they can just visualize music in their mind.
Yeah.
That was my first, like, I unlocked a dimension. I felt like, okay, I
Like,
never felt that I could do that.
yeah, I've heard many say it's almost like a whole nother language. It's teaching your brain to
Yeah.
think in a different way, and then you interpret, and almost like learning another language. It starts by seeing or hearing something and then relating it. Then it turns into
Yeah.
full just translation. Then it turns into thinking in that brain. And I've definitely seen it, like you probably have, with musicians who play any kind of instrument, or even just singers who can just say, I can't fully, lots of them can't fully explain the science behind it like
Mm.
you're doing. They can just say, no, it doesn't feel right. Here's what it should be. And then they'll play it and you're like, 100%.
Yeah, that
That's
happens. I haven't gotten there, to be
yeah,
honest. I know a lot of music producers that can produce a beat from scratch in 5 minutes, and that sounds so great.
yeah,
And I rack my brains for like hours, and but I'm like in the process. But that day I felt like shit, I wanna learn so much about this. And because I do that stuff in my physics stuff as well, because this might you might have heard from like the cool YouTube videos, like that everything is a wave. Everything that
yeah,
you see around you is a wave, more or less. So it actually like relates to the physics that I do. And I was like, shit. There was like a feedback that I learned from music and I applied it to my physics stuff. And then I learned more from the physics stuff and applied back into the thing. And that just made me want to understand it more. And the more I understood, the more I understood the vibe of the music. Like, how do you make someone make a certain emotion, feel a certain emotion? And I was like, shit, this is interesting. I don't know. I'm like, maybe I'm not very articulate about it, but
no, I
just,
mean,
but yeah, I just wanted to tinker around. Yeah, just tinkering. That's my thing. And that's what I still do. That I want to understand each and everything. like I see a problem. A few years back, I wasn't like this. I was like a lazy guy that was like, oh shit, I don't want to do this. This is another
Yeah.
problem. But now I've met such crazy people and they've inspired me somehow that if I see a problem, no, I'll rack my brain on this for a week rather than
Mhm.
just letting it go. Somehow happens miraculously.
Yeah, it's interesting when you surround yourself with more creative people, how you feel
True.
more inspired, but also competitive in some ways, at least for me,
Hmm.
of, oh, what are they doing? I got to figure that out. Or what are they doing? I got to be better there. I don't know if you've seen The Bear, but there was an episode recently where one of the chefs is talking about the only reason he became a good chef was he was trying to keep up with the head chef at his kitchen, and then he surpassed
Hmm.
him. And it was just a game of like when you have that drive, when you get excited by
Hmm.
something and you're surrounded by other people doing it, it definitely pushes you at least in the right direction to learn more and to be better.
Yeah, truly spoken. Like the importance of some community to drive you
Yeah.
has been great in my case. I could have been doing this alone maybe, but the process would have just decayed down and I would have stopped eventually.
Yeah. I was going to say definitely in New York.
Oh
Have you
shit, yeah.
found a community there? Are you doing it through
Yeah.
university or elsewhere? Or?
So there are a lot of like information that I'm picking from different places. Like I'm
Yeah.
learning art history in my college. That's something that I never did. Maybe this semester I had my first art classes like overall. And it's just so it was so expensive. Like I never had an art class, like a formal one.
Yeah.
So it was a more discussion based class and I was never in science is probably written on the blackboard and you understand it. Maybe ask a question once in a while and that's probably it.
Yeah.
But here you discuss your ideas. That's another dimension for me. That's what I'm getting. Apart from that, there's some creative spaces that I've found. I had
Hmm.
to try a lot of them to figure out where I fit into.
Sure.
That's maybe the tricky part in New York because there's so many places, but everybody has a different personality. You might not fit into all of them.
Yeah.
So gladly I found one such space like a month back, and I go there every week, meet such cool people, do some weird stuff,
Yeah.
and they've been very good in giving me feedback. Like I just tell them I'm having this problem, and they help me out, and I love that. Like
Yeah, it's
that
nice to
shared
find
struggle.
those collaborative communities that everyone can be and should be a critic at a certain point, but it's nice to find those who are able to help you with your craft and not just say, no, not for you. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of music you're making. You mentioned building your own drums and synths. What
Yeah.
programs do you use? How did you first get started with that?
My first program was, I would say, there's something called pure data. It's a very algorithmic music. So there's a genre called algorithm, they call it,
Oh,
and
okay.
they make music through coding stuff. That's what I started with because it's very easy. You just have to connect wires. Whoever would have used any node-based software, Blender has some stuff. People who use Blender might be aware. You just have blocks. You don't need to have a sense of the you just
Hmm.
have to have a sense of this black box does this, and this is an input, this is an output, and you just connect them and pretty modular. You might have heard of Eurorack. Do you know? There are
No.
these setups where they have a shit ton of wires and they go all the way and they produce really freaky music.
Yeah.
That's something what they call modular programming. Is
Okay.
that you don't need to know the science or stuff, but you need to know what's happening there. And that's what I started getting into it. But I wasn't really getting the vibe because it still was too technical.
Yeah.
And then also I'm also interested in relating the visuals to the audio. I just don't want to look audio as a piece because there have been some few live performances that were like, oh shit, I want to do this. So I wanted to learn that. And that also, I think there's so many niche spaces that are very different. I had to figure out which one do I fit into where my needs are met. And I've realized that there is no software that you would have the perfect one for you.
Yeah.
The best you can do is have two, three softwares. They're like, okay, this is my gig and this is what I do now. So that's after trying a lot of softwares, I've settled into VCV Rack. That is something that is the Euro Rack that I was mentioning. They have these in rave parties. They have a lot of wires. It's like an exact simulation of that thing on your PC. So you literally have wires going around and like voltages and all that. And it is very algorithmic in the sense that I do not need to know about music theory. I guess that's one cheat that I use. I don't know shit. I mean, if somebody asked me to read a sheet music, I would just freak out and cry. That's what tech is for, like cheating this stuff, right?
Well, it's
So that's
interesting because I feel like things have been around for a little while, but they've definitely, in the last few years, at least to me, really improved as far as the availability and the abilities. I've been a longtime GarageBand user,
hmm.
and even in 7, 8, 9, I was putting in loops and just trying to make my own little compilations, and they're terrible. They're not good. But it would tell you what key it was in, and it would tell you everything from to speed and whatever else, beats per minute. But it was fun to play with, where it sounds like what you're doing now is similarly different. You don't have to know the theory side, but you're playing with modules, knowing where to put those things
Hmm.
together until it sounds good. Is that about right?
Yeah, yeah, that's about right. And one thing I've discovered that I like about music that I create now is the randomness.
Yeah.
I don't know like what's gonna happen both emotionally speaking, like what I'm gonna create, because one thing that I do is called live code. Like I
Hmm.
create pieces from scratch and that's how I do. I don't sit and think, okay, this is gonna be what I'm gonna be making and I like in how music producers do, they have a proper sheet and they build
Yeah.
upon it and stuff. I'm like, no, I'm gonna create things from scratch each time that I sit. And it's so random, just emotionally speaking. I don't know, like I might think I'm gonna make something calm and then start making trance music. I don't
Yeah.
know how it happens, but it happens sometimes. And also, mathematically speaking, too, there are a lot of randomness that you induce. I don't know, with strings or beats or whatever. That gives me a sense of organicness, I would say, that I don't think, I don't know, I don't want to talk about authenticity, but I do want to talk about like very pure musical scenes,
Yeah.
like when they were unadulterated, maybe like thousands of years back, how people listen to music. They were random, they didn't have like sheet music, they just played something and something came out and meant something. So I want to be that and I want to discover what those somethings mean in the process. So I use a lot of random components. Like sometimes the drums hit, sometimes it doesn't. I like that about the music that I make. Kind of random.
Yeah. Like somewhat of a jazz plus
Oh yeah.
live aspect to it of just letting it take you and
Mm.
learning to pivot and not just stop if it doesn't sound exactly how you thought it would.
Doing things live have been like difficult. I've tried just like in small circles to perform,
Hmm.
but it has always freaked me out because I started things as a visual artist. So just by concept, people don't visually perform. They just do it in their room or whatever, and they just show you at the exhibition.
Yeah.
And so it was a very new concept to me to perform. I still don't perform gigs or whatever. I was scared. I performed a few times around some of my friends. It was just a very nervous experience. So what I've been doing recently, like actually just from a week maybe, is that I've set up my laptop so that feeds directly to the Instagram live thing
Yeah.
and just perform my setups live from scratch, audio, visuals. And
That's awesome.
performing live has been a very rich experience that I felt like I've been missing my whole life. Yeah, that was it.
Do you feel like you enjoy knowing other people are watching as you're doing it right there and then if the music is shared between you two or what's yeah,
Yeah.
what draws you to that?
Yeah, I think I want people to see my process because my like final sound at least is very raw. If
Hmm.
some I just whatever I did, I just recorded and gave it to someone else, they would probably think it's garbage.
Okay.
But if they saw what I'm doing, They would understand my process. Maybe they would understand the nuances that, okay, it's not about the end product, it's more about the journey, how you got there,
Hmm.
my performances. So I want people to understand. I kind of relate this experience from one of the art exhibitions that I did, not related to music. But what happened is, I from like my childhood, I always used to see these people, these artists that had their exhibitions here and there. Is like posh artists that are like they don't know and they just say random shit. But when I actually went there and I talked to people, I understood that it's not about those random shit. It's about you not getting the context of what they're saying. And you get the context when you've been through the process. And I just want people to be empathetic towards the process too. Not, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because especially for those who don't create at all or don't understand, yeah, like you're saying, don't understand the process, it seems a little too ethereal for them. It doesn't feel
Yes.
concrete, it doesn't feel real. I have a difficult time because I love talking about movies, I love talking about where they came from and the ideas or where a certain scene will actually mean
Mm,
something different than what's being shown on screen just blatantly. But if
mm,
someone does not enjoy that side of movies, it just immediately not just goes over their head. It feels like you're trying to con them. They're like,
mm.
"Oh, it doesn't mean that." There's no way they can mean that. I was watching a movie with someone the other day, and they're like, "There's no way a director has everything in the movie intentionally." And I was like, "No. In fact, they do. Usually, it's intentional all the way through." And I feel the same way, like you're saying about music and art. Of it's easy to pass it off, especially because we have such a big bullshit filter and a worry that we're getting conned. Where
Yeah.
it's, hold on, there's a story here that's more than just what you're seeing. And if the story sounds fake, okay, whatever, leave it be. But maybe understand more of the story to help you appreciate what you're seeing.
That's the point of an artist to be articulate with their medium.
And a lot of artists are often misunderstood. Living in New York, there's so many stories there of people misunderstood, things taken out of context, or no one really getting it. With your music, how do you feel like you are getting it out? You said you're doing the Instagram lives. Are you
Mm.
also thinking of putting it on YouTube or elsewhere, or doing scores or things for short films? How do you see your music being used elsewhere?
How do I see my music? That's maybe a bit too early for me to answer. I've just been making music since a year, maybe a little bit more than that.
Okay.
But what I want to get out of it is to be able to perform someday. I don't know. I just want to perform like a proper gig kind of setup where I
Yeah.
have the music, I have the visuals and everything. I just want to be able to perform. I don't think I'm gonna do scores or put my stuff on Spotify or something
Yeah.
because I think that would be like killing a big aspect of my music, I would say.
Hmm.
Because as I said, if somebody didn't see it live or in real time, they would not understand it.
Yeah. And you got to have that context, like we just talked about.
Yeah.
So, for anyone looking to get into generative music and to try this out, what advice would you have for them?
So the thing that worked for me is that start with something simple. You might not understand everything. It might seem like a black box, but make some cool music first. Sounds really
Mhm.
trippy to you. Because I started the other way around. I like a physicist approach. I want to understand everything, make things from scratch. Took me a long time, not because I didn't understand, but because I felt like it was not worth doing because I'm not making good music.
Gotcha.
So I thought first give yourself a motivation, make some cool music. And there are shit ton of tutorials that you can just copy paste to do that stuff. But once you're there, then maybe go back to the basic. Use a software that teaches you to make stuff from scratch. Because at least for generative music, it's very different from music production, I've realized. In
Mhm.
music production, you have a lot of pieces, you have the samples, you have the synths and everything. You just have to piece it in your brain together. Whereas it's even more fundamental in generative music. You have to do the sound design yourself too. You have to know where to put the randomness or the more technical step sequencing and whatever. You have to know. I guess, yeah, I would say go make some cool music without really understanding anything of it. And once you're there, you feel like, okay, I'm making some trippy music. Then maybe I would say go back to the basics, make all those things from scratch. And then maybe I think you might most probably be there. After that, it's their choice if they want to make scores, perform live, because it's such an unexplored field, this generative art. Even now, people are still figuring stuff out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like most people are worried about AI and what it's gonna mean, and oh my gosh, it's taken over, right? That's just all the buzzword everywhere. But also the flip side of it being there's so many new and interesting ways we can do things with music where that technology and art are meeting, where I don't think we've
Yeah,
had this for obviously forever, but I don't think we've had this much accessibility to having an open mind and trying something totally new, which is pretty
yeah.
amazing.
I for sure, I mean, give wanna support accessibility because I feel like we have a lot of thinkers, engineers, more
Yeah.
thematic stuff, but a lot less chaotic stuff like music and art. As a community, if we move towards or even widen our net in that direction, I would so much love people to know about that.
Yeah, I brought up with a friend one time, and I wish there was a different way to get this idea out there or to vie for it. I wish schools, especially public schools, would adopt things like generative
For sure.
music or modulators, things like that, because you don't have to have instruments. These kids already have laptops or iPads. But there's an opportunity to teach music, which, like you talked about earlier, can create a positive feedback loop of the more you learn creatively, the more it can help your science, your maths, any other part of your brain. Just giving people an opportunity to expand what they believe is possible and what they can create. Because there's something I know you can speak to that is so great about creating something and saying, that was me, I put that together.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it's such a cool feeling that I made the shit. And a lot of other things happen, like in the way it's not a very nice road. That makes maybe makes it even more worth it.
Yep. Like you said, the story and the journey, that's more important than the end product sometimes. Well, before we go, I was going to ask who are you listening to, or who do you draw inspiration from? Who's making things that really excite you?
So recently, I've been into two people that are from geographically very different places,
Yeah.
but make somehow similar music that I'm really into nowadays. Have you heard of Billy Woods?
No.
So he's a rapper, but makes like really experimental music production. His rap is too whack, like it doesn't rhyme. Some of it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And it was difficult to get in the groove because it's very close to my thing that I do, but still it's put in a very different context. His
Yeah.
stories are different. It was difficult, but once I got into it, I was like, oh shit, this is interesting. I feel bop my hair and groove. Anything
Mm.
that makes me want to groove, okay, I want to get into it. And after that, I guess there's a Indian artist called Dhanji. He's also like that. He produces, to be honest, I first thought he was like a really shitty artist. But I heard more of it and I was like, okay, this is genius actually. He produces such weird music that you would question yourself, why am I even listening to this? He says really weird shit, talks about really different topics like government and like economy. I don't know how people can write
Wow.
about economic status of your country in a rap, but he did.
Yeah.
I don't know how it came about that, but he did. And these are some people that I've been really looking forward. And apart from these, there's some Indian artists that I look up to because they so apart from the music and lyrics, that's obviously there. But as
Yeah.
I said, I'm also interested in seeing people live performing someday if things
Hmm.
happen miraculously. I like people when they have set up performance, like their live is not just a studio version singing of them. So there's some parallels that I want to draw again. Kendrick Lamar, I haven't seen him live, but I've seen his live recordings, and
Mhm.
I so much want to see him live. Really goated rapper, obviously, no question in
Yeah.
that.
One of the
But
best.
yeah, but no doubt, but his live, like the dance, the visuals at the back, it's a whole audio visual experience that you won't forget. It's not
Yeah.
that he's just coming and singing the exact same thing. So I look I look forward to I haven't been able to see them live, even though I've been living in New York. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And there's an Indian artist who does rap in Punjabi.
Uh-huh.
He's called Prabdeep, and he's a very good rapper. He writes very philosophical pieces that you
Okay.
might want to read, just like a poem to understand it. But apart from all that, good music, good lyrics, his performances are whack. Like costumes he wears, and he has like a mosh pit in the stage,
Wow.
and there's so much going on, like lighting wise, sound design wise, and the whole set. He's obviously not Kendrick Lamar, but I think given
Mhm.
enough time, he'll get there, and he's getting there, to be honest. So that's someone I want to see live, and maybe in a decade I want to work with him. I don't know how, but I want to get there. That's one of my life goals. I feel like if not just like meeting him backstage and stuff like that, meeting him in a party, I want to work with him, know him as an artist, and
Yeah.
how his thought process came out about to be. And this is something I want to do, and if I am able to do that someday, I feel like okay, that's my life is complete now.
Yeah. That would be
Yeah.
pretty great to work with one of the greats. That's great. And honestly, hearing, like you just said, these artists that are all doing something a little different, being philosophical, not just being poppy, where there's a space for pop music, but doing something that's a little different, that's maybe not as accessible to everybody at once, but that
Yeah.
once you get into it and listen, like you said, you didn't like them at first, and then the more you listened, the more you said, these are good artists, and this is a different kind of music that hits you in a different way.
True.
And I definitely think we need more of that, and not need more of that. It already exists. You go on
Yeah.
SoundCloud, and there's 100,000 people you have no idea who they are, but they might be doing something interesting. I just hope, as people are a little more segmented through online communities or in
Yeah.
person, that it creates more opportunities for this kind of music to be shared and not so individually listened to, because that's also good. But I hope there's more opportunities for us to connect with other people who are liking what we
Yeah.
like.
I think there are platforms emerging,
Yeah.
but it's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I've always thought Spotify shows you who else follows this artist. There
Yeah.
should be an opportunity right there and then to have a message board or something to that effect, some way to connect with them more than just, oh, we all follow them. Because it's fun to see who follows each other, but there should be some other way to connect with fans of the same band.
True. Never thought about it actually.
Yeah. There's another idea before you graduate, before you get your PhD. One
uh,
more project to tack on.
yeah, I hope I do graduate someday.
Someday soon.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you again for coming on, and we'll definitely reconnect. Hopefully, I'll have links in the show notes as well as on our article for all of our listeners to be able to listen to some of your music where it's been or follow you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And thank you again.
And thank you for you to invite me here.
Of course. Did you go to the theater last weekend at all?
No, I didn't. I went to Zion. I
Okay.
was camping.
Theater of the Gods.
The Theater of the Gods. You're right.
In addition to our alien movies, I want to talk about what we've been watching in general. So you can talk about streaming or otherwise. But I got to ask first because I want to talk about the Bikeriders. Have you seen the Bikeriders?
I have not seen the Bikeriders yet.
Are you going to see the Bikeriders?
I probably should see the Bikeriders because Austin Butler is like one of my favorite people now, even though I don't want to like him.
You're going to love him in this. I'm going to try to do this spoiler free as possible. We have a written review from Jackson Tapp, our writer in Utah, up on the site already. Go ahead and check that out. There's also some spoilers there. But I think for everyone who's interested in this movie, you have to be a little prepared. because the trailer and the images just sell the vibe as so hard, it's difficult to ever live up to it. Like the little bits we saw were like a perfume commercial, and
Yes.
you're like, oh my gosh, it's just dripping with sex and sexy and motorcycle. I'm gonna be honest, for me, I liked it, but it's a lot of vibes. The movie's just a lot of vibes.
What does that mean?
The vibe and the feeling of what's going on is more important, and at least for me, set in more than the plot did. I got
Okay.
home, thought about it the next morning. I couldn't recall most of what happened in the movie.
Okay, so this is like a what's that one? Christopher Nolan, Tenet. This is a Tenet movie where the feeling is more important than the details.
Yeah, I would say so. There's some big plot moments you're going to recognize as, oh, this is important. Oh, this is important. But it's much more a story, and I do love this, especially for our modern age. It's much more a story of just a bunch of guys who bonded over motorcycles and created a motorcycle gang, being the last little bookmark before motorcycle gangs turned into full-on gangs. Drugs, murder,
Mm.
prostitution, all the rest of it. This is the last big gang. And so you have Tom Hardy, who just loves doing a funny voice. He just loves it. And he's doing the funniest of funny voices. You have Jodie Comer, also doing a good funny voice. She's great in it, I will say. Austin Butler's just doing Austin Butler. He's always a little bit Elvis. But I'll just say, like, the movie is interesting in that it doesn't have such a strong plot all the way through of like explosion, fight, gang battle. It's not the Warriors. There's much more these guys trying to escape through motorcycles and how motorcycles become their entire lives and it becomes their death.
Yes.
You live and die on this machine between your legs. So yeah, it's good. I really liked it.
There's a lot of layers to that sentence that you just said.
Should we dissect it? Should we dissect the bike?
Oh, is the bike a metaphor for masculinity?
It honestly is. Yes. And I
Hmm.
think that's the biggest part is people are going to go to this movie, watch it, and leave and go, I don't get it. He just rode a motorcycle. The heavier themes, the stuff that actually sticks with you is wanting so badly to preserve this thing that has become yours and you've identified yourself by it and you're going to live and die by it. It's punching, it's bloody, it's manly. It only lasts until the next manliest person shows up, right?
Oh my gosh, what a losing game.
Terrible losing game. And so you'll see through the cast of characters, which by the way is really well cast. These gangs, we're just going to say what it is. These gangs were mostly only white for the most part. Guys in varying ages, some that missed the war, some that went to the war, some that came back from the war. We're talking about like the 1960s to 70s, late 60s to the 70s. The story is told through the lens of Mike Feist from Challengers and West Side Story is an interviewer interviewing Jodie Comer about the gang. And so he's driving the plot forward, but then there's a lot of different time jumps and things that kind of skip around. She's waxing nostalgic at points. You don't know how recent it is. It's a little bit non-linear. But again, if you just keep in your mind that it's more telling a story of masculinity, biker culture,
Yeah.
men just wanting to be around men in a certain type of way and what that brings, you're going to enjoy it. So for those wanting a straight biker movie or like the Hells Angels, the movie, this is not that.
You're going to be disappointed because it's a gay biker movie.
Honestly, though, there's a beautiful love triangle of Austin Butler, Tom Hardy, and Jodie Comer connected by different types of love, but it is a
Yeah.
love triangle.
Oh.
And I'm going to tell you what, it's pretty powerful.
Oh.
We
It's
all
just not a
know-
it's just not a straight biker movie. It's something else.
Yeah, it's definitely not Sons of Anarchy. It's not the Mayans. It's just not what it's just not what a lot of people are going to expect. And I'm a little sad for all the middle-aged Midwestern dads going to see this movie expecting one thing, because they're definitely going to leave with a lot more on their plate, that they're going to have to take long drives, eat a single burger, and go home to their wife and say, I'm totally fine, honey, and not have to talk about it.
Oh
There's a lot
no.
of those. Should I get a therapist? Then again, a double cheese is $2
A double cheese is a lot cheaper than a therapist.
and a lot quicker to get through.
I'll have to check it out.
It's a good one, and it is based on a true story enough. So
that's
Mike Feist, the guy he's playing, is Danny Lyon, Lyon, Leon. Who knows? It seems pretty white, so I'll say Lyon. He released a photo book called The Bikeriders, and so that's what Mike Feist's character is doing. He's interviewing, he's taking pictures, he's interviewing, he's taking pictures. He shows up at a lot of the group's events, and it is based on this. And at the end of the movie, it's nice to see who they cast, what the real bikers look like, and you'll like the authenticity part if you're a history
Cool.
boy.
Oh, that's fun.
That's what I've been watching.
I've been doing a lot of streaming. Star Wars, The Acolyte, and I've been watching The Boys as well.
Okay.
And because the season 4 of The Boys is in the middle of releasing right now, and The Acolyte, they're both, in the middle of being released.
Yeah.
The Acolyte is fun. I think that Disney certainly has had some misses with their Star Wars series streamers. But I like that this one is set in an era of Star Wars that we just haven't really visited before. It's got nothing to do with Skywalkers, which is a refreshing way to do a take on Star Wars, especially because I think some of the best Star Wars series has been like Andor, which had nothing. It was a political thriller is what it was. But this, The Acolyte is set hundreds of years before kind of the main handful of trilogies. And the Jedi are large and in charge, and the Sith aren't even a thing that's on anyone's radars. And in fact, even to the point where dark force wielding, what we would see as Sith, show up, and they're like, no, these aren't the Sith, because the Jedi are so caught in their way of being like, no, we're in charge, that when reality starts to show differently, they can't allow themselves to see it, which is a fun part of reading the Jedi, much more nuanced than just the space samurai who are always good.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I'm excited to see how it develops. But I think The Boys, have you seen The Boys at all?
I've watched everything except for the new season. So I was going to say, I've started Acolyte. I've waited on The Boys. I'm like, maybe next week I'll dig in.
Yeah. It's a good time for it. I think for me, what's so funny is the buzz online about The Boys the last couple of weeks has been that like a certain demographic of Americans are realizing that the show's been making fun of them the whole time.
No.
And they didn't get it until season 4. And I'm like, how could you get 3+ seasons deep in a show and not realize that the show's been making fun of you the whole time? Truly like mind boggling. I really like The Boys because to me, it's in the title. This is one of the things that this show is dealing with is different forms of masculinity and power and authority and what that does to people. And how people use it and how people will just be absolute sycophants to people who they think are stronger than they are. And so I think it's really good and fun kind of exploration of masculinity and power dynamics. I think Homelander is easily one of the most fun villains that I've seen depicted on TV, the last 5 years probably. He's really scary, but he's also affable. And he's really chaotic and unpredictable in some ways. But you also, as the longer the shows go on, the more you start to understand why he is the way that he is. And he is a complete victim of a system, of a machine that created him. Yeah. And it makes sense why he is the way that he is. But that doesn't excuse him for being an asshole.
This almost sounds like you're just talking about boys.
The Boys. The show is about the boys.
Yeah, Anthony Starr as Homelander, I think it's not only one of the best castings, but it always makes me excited for what they're going to do next if someone can use him the right way and doesn't just put him in this little box, because he is a fantastic actor. The range. Yeah,
I won't just get ready for episode 4 because there's a number of A plot, B plots that go on in episode 4. But the Homelander plot is pretty self-contained in that episode, and Anthony Starr's range and nuance in his playing of his scenes is it's very impressive.
All right. Yeah, I've been putting it off a little bit. I know it came out beginning of this month. I'm excited to watch. It's just one of those ones I know once I start, I'm going to watch the whole thing. I mean, did you watch Gen V?
No, I did not.
Oh, I watched Gen V, and I think I binged it all in about like 3 days.
Oh, wow.
So big fan of The Boys, big fan of what they're doing there. Honestly, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, good job on the production side. But I'm excited to watch it, and I'm glad to hear that there's one more season after this one, but no more, if I have it right.
I think they said they're going to end at season 5.
Yeah, good to have a definite end to the story. Good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to do more spinoffs because they've got Gen V, right? And I think they're going to keep that show going. And I wanted to say that I've heard buzz of something else too.
I know that's slightly on a pause because one of the main characters did pass away.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah, The Boys on Prime. They're doing week-to-week episode releases. Is that right?
Yeah, they dropped the first 3 off the bat so that you could get deep into it. And I think they're doing week to week from here on until the end of the season. So when
All
you
right.
finish it, we'll circle back and we'll talk about it again.
We definitely will. Maybe we'll have a professor or someone who knows about masculinity and wants to talk to us about it.
Hell yeah, dude. I think that'd be
We'll have
great.
to see. Yep. That wraps it up for today. I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode, and we'll be back with more of our Aliens in America series, another interview soon, and more discussion of what we've been watching. Until then, watch good TV and movies.